Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the March 2025 edition of the Southeast Monthly Climate Webinar, where we talk about the climate and special topics pertaining to the Southeast region. My name is Chris Furman. I'm the Deputy Director of the Southeast Regional Climate Center, and I'll be giving a climate overview of the past month. Our other speakers today are Shelby Saxon from the Southeast River Forecast Center, who will provide a water resources update, Pam Knox from the University of Georgia, who will provide an agricultural impacts update. Joining us today, we're pleased to have Brad Pugh from NOAA's Climate Prediction Center, who will be discussing and breaking down what's behind the seasonal and subseasonal outlooks. So again, thank you all for joining us this morning. Just a reminder, type those questions and comments into the question box at any time, and they'll be answered at the end. Also, a recap email of this webinar will be sent out with a YouTube link to the recording in the next day or so. All right, let's jump in with an overview of the climate. All right, so over the past month, we see the temperatures have been well above average across the northern half of the region. Some locations running 5 to 6 degrees above average, while the southern half of the region has been a bit closer to average. Much of South Florida has actually been running about a degree or two below average. I know this sounds like a broken record, but it continues to be warm across the Caribbean. San Juan is off to its fourth warmest start to the month of March, and even St. Thomas the Virgin Islands is off to one of its warmest starts to the month as well. All right, next slide. So in terms of precipitation, we're still a bit in that feast or famine pattern across the Southeast that we've talked about before, though there's been perhaps more famine recently than feast, especially across the interior and northern portions of the region. Of note, Lynchburg, Virginia has only recorded 0.35 inches of rain so far this month, and that's the driest start to the month of March in a record that goes all the way back to 1893. On the other hand, there are some locations across Florida and eastern portions of the Carolinas that have seen above average precipitation over the past month. Parts of the Caribbean have also been a bit wetter than average recently, though there are some dry spots if we look across the southern and western portions of Puerto Rico and parts of the Virgin Islands as well. All right, next slide. There we go. So we can see the impact of these precipitation patterns on the U.S. Drought Monitor. If you look across the interior of the region, you'll see some expansion of dryness and moderate drought across portions of Alabama, western portions of the Carolinas, as well as some eastern portions of Georgia and South Carolina, which have also been dry recently. Moderate and even severe drought have also expanded a bit across South Florida. On the other hand, though, we've seen some improvements across the Florida Panhandle and southern portions of Georgia, as well as central and northern portions of Alabama and eastern portions of Tennessee, North Carolina, and Virginia. In terms of the Caribbean, Puerto Rico remains drought-free. In fact, last week marked 48 consecutive weeks without any drought. That takes us all the way back to April of last year and also marks the longest such streak in nearly 6 years. Now, we did see abnormal dryness return to St. John and St. Thomas a couple of weeks ago. That ended a streak that extended to February of last year on St. John over a year ago and to April of 2024, nearly a year ago on St. Thomas. Okay, next slide. All right, so for the second straight month, we've seen a pretty active pattern of severe weather, not just across the Southeast, but across parts of the Midwest and Mississippi River Valley. The biggest outbreak so far this year occurred from the 14th to the 16th of March. So far, over 110 tornadoes have been confirmed across 14 states. 27 of those tornadoes occurred across the SCRCC region. Most of these touched down in Alabama, and the total track, at least so far, is an incredible 235 miles. That's about as long as the drive from Birmingham to Mobile. Several of these were strong tornadoes, some of which, tragically though, were fatal. On the evening of March 15th, an EF3 tornado killed 2 people and injured another 2 in the town of Plantersville. That's about 40 miles northwest of Montgomery. I will say one silver lining from this tornado was that several, in fact, numerous people survived by seeking shelter in either concrete structures or basements. And this is a great lesson for all of us as we head deeper into the heart of severe weather season. Another fatal tornado, this one an EF2, occurred around the same time in the community of Winterboro, that's just south of Talladega. The old high school building was severely damaged there when a school bus was lifted and slammed into the side of the gymnasium. Another EF2 touchdown further south in Pike County, causing significant damage and injuring 3 people, while an EF1 tornado injured 3 people in the community of Woodville in northeastern North Carolina. And although not shown here, there was another EF2 earlier in the month in Seminole County, Florida, that caused major damage to several homes in the community of Whispering Woods. That's located about 10 miles northeast of Orlando, though fortunately no fatalities or injuries were reported from that event. Okay, next slide.
Apologies for the delay in transition. It's a
No,
technological issue.
no worries, Meredith. No worries at all. All right, so severe weather was certainly a big story, but one of maybe the biggest story in the region has actually been the uptick in wildfire activity and the heightened fire danger that we've seen here recently, due not just to the warm temperatures, but the low humidity and also high winds. As of yesterday, we had several active wildfires especially across parts of Florida and the Carolinas. One of the largest is the 344 fire that's in southwest Miami-Dade County, and that's been burning since March 13th and has actually grown to over 26,000 acres. On March 22nd, though, it was reported to be about 50% contained. This fire, some of you may have heard of this fire, it made national headlines because it significantly impacted travel to and from the Florida Keys. That's important this time of year because it's spring break season. More recently, a wildfire ignited in the Mount Vernon area in northern Mobile County in Alabama, spreading to nearly 150 acres, though fortunately it was reported recently to be fully contained. Portions of western North Carolina and South Carolina have experienced several wildfires recently, the most notable ones being in Polk County, North Carolina. This includes the Black Cove Fire, the Deep Woods Fire, and the Fishhook Fire. The Black Cove and Deep Woods fires have burned nearly 1,000 acres and have 0% containment, and a few structures have been destroyed. The Fishhook fire has burned about 100 acres, and that's nearly 50% contained, but has unfortunately destroyed quite a few structures. Fortunately, though, there have been no confirmed casualties, though, as you've probably seen on the news, mandatory evacuations were ordered in parts of Polk County, and they even opened a shelter in nearby Columbus, North Carolina to assist evacuees. If we look a little further south into South Carolina, the Table Rock fire, that's been burning for a few days in Pickens County, and that's grown to over 300 acres with 0% containment. And there we've got several factors. We have a combination of very steep terrain there in the mountains, but we also have lots of tree debris from Helene, and that's really hindered firefighting efforts there. And also firefighters are working to fully contain a wildfire that's been burning near Myrtle Beach. That's known as the Covington, or has been known as the Covington Drive fire. That actually began nearly 3 weeks ago and has burned remarkably over 2,000 acres, but is now about 80% contained. Now, keep in mind, this is not an exhaustive list or map of active fires. This really highlights some of the bigger ones. In fact, there are well over 300 active fires right now burning across the eastern U.S. And so if this is of interest to you, you're encouraged to contact your state's forestry or natural resource department, or check out the National Interagency Fire Center website. I have that listed there at the bottom of the slide if you need current conditions and details of fires in your state. Okay, next slide. Here's another interesting fire story that was reported locally here in central North Carolina, but it had its origins to the west. Several weeks ago, there were numerous reports of dust, dirt, and ash literally raining down on people's cars as they were heading out to work in the morning. We got some photos here on the right of vehicles that covered in all this stuff. Some meteorologists at WRAL-TV in Raleigh used the high split model to see where all this might have come from, and it turns out the air originated over the desert Southwest and the Southern Plains, where, as I'm sure you know, we've had quite a few dust storms and also several large wildfires. And so how did all this dust, dirt, and ash make it onto the cars? Well, it literally did rain down. We had a line of showers move through overnight, and that helped drag the particulates down to the surface. And something that's interesting, there's actually a record from the old U.S. Weather Bureau of this same thing happening in Wilmington, in North Carolina, all the way back in March of 1926, almost 100 years ago. So while this is an unusual phenomenon, apparently this type of event is not unprecedented. Okay, next slide. All right, so switching gears here a bit. As expected, it looks like La Nina conditions will be short-lived. As we see in the latest diagnostic discussion from the CPC, they indicate a weakening of the what's already been a weak La Nina in the equatorial Pacific. The current outlook is for a transition to ENSO neutral to take place within the coming months and persist through the summer, though as we know, typical this time of year, there's a lot of uncertainty in our ENSO forecast, especially long term, uh, at least until we cross that spring predictability barrier. And you can see this reflected in the latest probability charts and also the forecast plume there, which actually show equal chances of both La Nina and neutral by the beginning of winter. So stay tuned as we head further into the season for more updated forecasts. All right, next slide. All right. Also want to mention here that since it's March, that means our quarterly climate impacts report from this past winter is now available on our website at the link at the bottom of the slide. If you've been with us the last couple webinars, you know it was a busy season. We had lots of cold weather, lots of winter weather. We had tornadoes, droughts, lots of impacts too. So check it out if you want a synopsis of this past season. And of course, please reach out to us if you have questions or if you have any specialized data requests. And so since Brad is going to cover the outlooks, we'll go ahead and turn, I believe, to the summary slide here at the end. There we go. As always, I want to acknowledge our service climatologist, William Schmitz. It's actually his birthday today. I want to thank him for all his help in putting this presentation together. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shelby for our water resources update.
Thank you, Chris. So Meredith, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So I'm going to jump right in looking at our 28-day average stream flows. And although we've had some rain almost everywhere in the southeast over the last month, our temperatures and the changing seasons hasn't really boded well to our rivers kind of being sustained at normal from that rainfall that we did receive. And so we're looking now at many of our headwaters starting to see dryness, and in our coastal areas, that water volume is kind of just working its way straight through the system and into the ocean. And so previously in this season, we haven't really seen our coastal areas quite reach the normal that we expect with our winter recharge. And now with our headwaters starting to fall below normal, we're seeing that kind of cascade out through the coast. So in North Carolina, we can kind of fully see it through working its way through the Piedmont region, where the headwaters are dry in the mountains, and then we're seeing dryness all the way through the coast. And that is just true across the southeast, and we'll look more at Florida in detail, but we know that this is their typical dry period, and so although there is some drought, we're still seeing their rivers at normal because this is a drier season for them. We can go to the next slide. And so now we'll move from west to east through our states and looking at our individual stream flow runoff. During the month of March, we quickly just kind of drop back off. And so that is that rain moving through the system, and not any additional kind of heavier events coming behind those initial that initial event that happened in the beginning of March and into February. And so we're falling back into below normal stream flows in Alabama, and we have that same pattern happening in Georgia. So we're exiting our kind of peak winter recharge period, and we're falling back into our below normal. And then moving to Florida, we've had enough rain to kind of just hold that system right at the below normal, and sometime peaking into the normal. And so we're currently paying attention to when the rainy season and summer month transition happens, because we have been just sustaining that system at the normal below normal line, and so we're going to want to keep an eye as we move into the summer months, or the spring and then the summer months. And we can go to the next slide.
Hit well to center field. Deion Sanders going back to the wall.
And so,
Bo Jackson homers.
Hold on. Okay, thank you.
okay, sorry, it looks like we had someone that was unmuted there. But I'll jump back in, and we're going to look at South Carolina, where unlike our other Southeast states, we saw quick rises into the normal flow in our January, February period. In South Carolina, we didn't kind of see that really quick bound into normal, and we've kind of just remained at our below normal through our winter recharge period. Though that decrease that the rest of the Southeast states saw, falling to the below normal, is also occurring in South Carolina. And so we want to be mindful that we are moving out of that winter recharge. And so the minor floods that we saw in the previous weeks in South Carolina kind of just were quick enough to sustain the system from falling to much below normal, but has kept it in that below normal criteria. In North Carolina, on the other hand, the streams have been able to capitalize on the rainfall. We saw that quick shot up to normal, and now we're lingering in the below normal to normal stream flow pattern. And so here we're looking a lot like in the trend for last year, except we don't have a El Nino going on. And so we are having a little concern that our stream flows here are declining quickly too early. And so we'll be, again, as the other states, trying to keep an eye as we move out of our recharge season and into the spring and convective periods.
Oh my God.
In Virginia, where there was good moisture all through the winter, and that kind of mostly came in the form of snow in the earlier months. And as Chris mentioned, temperatures there have kind of remained below normal, and so that has been helpful there for them to reach above normal and much above normal stream flows. But same in this March period, rainfall has been kind of limited in where it occurs and when it occurs. And so also in Virginia, we've started to fall into the below normal stream flow area. And so we can go to the next slide. And so now we're just going to look at our current river conditions. And so we did have a bit of flooding last week. We actually ended up having, I believe, 2 moderate floods from rain in the earlier part of the weekend going into the Monday of the week. And so near Amory, Mississippi and Seabrook, Virginia, we did result in 2 moderate floods. But those waves have started making their way to the coast. And so we're just seeing a few action and minor stages lingering at our coastal points now. And on most of those waves have crested and are starting to recede. Yesterday morning, when this graphic was grabbed, we'd actually just had quite a decent shot of rain in our northern Alabama and Mississippi basins. And so here you'll see we actually do have a point at the time that was forecasted to reach action stage, and that actually did not occur. And so all of our streams across northern Alabama and Mississippi are now below flood stage. And we can go to the next slide. And so, what is normal flooding for this time of year? And this is still an impactful time, though we don't want there to be damaging river floods. It is good to see our recharge in our winter season before we head into kind of where we slope off and seeing streams reaching their peak flows. And so, this is a time where we do expect that our streams are high and maybe we do have a frequency of flooding. So, what we saw last week was not abnormal, and we do expect to continue to maybe see a few more weeks of substantial rain and flooding in the southeast. We can go to the next slide where we'll talk about Florida and how its rainy season is different and what we're seeing there. And so, week 13 in Florida, we can have some flooding, but because of the La Nina and our transition into possible neutral conditions, things have stayed pretty quiet in Florida this year. And so we'll be keeping a watch for how the convective and wet season and the hurricane season later on bode to the development of the recharge in Florida. And we can go to the next slide. And so we're predicting normal risk for flooding across the southeast. As we saw, we, sorry.
Oh, man.
Looks like we're back. Okay, so normal risk for flooding across the southeast. We're currently at a point where all of our systems are kind of teetering right on that below normal to normal stage, and so that is hopeful that any amount of rain could sustain us. Any decreases from our normal amounts of rain, we are looking at a drying out of souls. And so, entering the convective season, localized heavy rain could produce flooding, but the regional risk for flooding remains normal for the season. You can go to the next slide. And so this is just my summary slide. This will be here for you to check out later. And if you have any questions, there is my email. And I will now hand it off to Pam to talk about agriculture.
All right, well, thank you, Shelby, and hello, everybody. It's a beautiful day, and it's going to be a great week for doing agriculture. Meredith, let's go right in. I want to make sure I give plenty of time for Brad here. A lot of the conditions that we've seen for agriculture were in the middle, at the beginning of the growing season. So corn has been planted. I talked last month about how the soil temperatures in southern Georgia were good for planting corn. A lot of it's done already. Warmer weather has allowed blooming all across most of the state, except for the highest elevations. The picture there on the left is from Jaymore Farms, which is northeast of Gainesville, sort of in the foothills of the Appalachians. And it's just beautiful. They probably are going to have to thin because they have so many blooms on those trees. There was a little bit of light frost damage from recent cold mornings, especially Friday, but really not very widespread. Vegetables are starting to be planted. Some of the early stuff is already being harvested. Same thing for strawberries. A few foliar diseases are occurring. There's some dry conditions, as you know, from Chris's talk about the drought, that are still hampering some pasture growth. And so there's still farmers that are feeding hay to their cattle. And then wildfires have become more widespread. And Chris also talked about that. And I'm going to add just a little bit to that. So let's go on, Meredith. And I think, what's the next slide I've got? There we go. Soil temperature and moisture. You can see the last week, soil temperatures across the southern part of the region at least have been a little cooler than normal. I think that's because of the rain that we've been having. But the northern part of the southeast, especially Virginia and eastern North Carolina, have been a little warmer than average. So farmers are really watching that carefully, and I'll show soil temperatures in a little more detail in just a minute. And you can see the top meter of soil is really quite dry across almost all of the region, except for a few patches in eastern Virginia along the Georgia coast. So we could all use rain. In the rain event that we had the last week, I think I just got maybe 1/4 of an inch. And that's going to have to last till next Sunday because that's when our next chance of rain is. So that is a problem because the plants are drinking up everything that we've got right now. And with the warm temperatures, that will continue. Let's go on. And the next slide looks at chill hour accumulation and the bloom. The phenological map here on the left just shows where spring bloom has already occurred. You can see southern Florida, it occurred kind of late, but since then we've been really rapidly increasing the blooms to the north. I went up to Asheville this weekend for a conference, and except for the highest elevations, everything is really blooming quite well. Another area in South Carolina that was a little behind average, but everything is blooming. And so if we do get another frost, which we'll talk about in a minute, that could be an issue, depending on how strong it is and how long it lasts. We're almost at the end of the chill hour accumulation for the year. We're going to end up, this is for Fort Valley, Peach County, Georgia, which is pretty close to Macon, right in the center of the state. You can see there they'll probably end up with just a little over 1,100 chill hours. And so better than last year, but not the same as the long-term average. So let's go to the next slide. The next slide just shows where we have had frost in the past, in March so far, and that this is the number of days that got to 32 or below. And you can see really there's only 1 or 2 days, most of those right at the beginning of March, where it got down to 32 or below. And there's a big area in South Georgia and Southeast Alabama, of course down in Florida as well, that has not gotten frost since the beginning of the month. And so the question is, are they going to get it? And the next slide, I look at the frost probabilities. And so what you'll see, there's 2 maps on there that show the 50% freeze on the left and the 10%, 1 in 10 years we have a frost later than that on the right. Right now we're in late March, so that's the royal blue that's shown on there. And you can see the average date of the last frost or last freeze for most of the region is in the northern half of Georgia and Alabama, and then western South Carolina. Most of North Carolina is still in play there, and this map doesn't include Virginia or Tennessee, sorry guys. But you can see the late freeze, 1 in 10 years we get a frost as late as late March down in southern Georgia and even into the panhandle of Florida a bit. So we're not entirely out of that yet. I did look at the long range models that go right now through April 8. They do not really show any freezing conditions across most of the region except for right in the very mountainous areas. And so we're not to Easter yet. Some of my farmers tell me nobody plants until Easter because that's when the last frost is likely to occur. But I think things are looking pretty good right now. So let's go on to the next slide. And in this slide, this is just some of the soil temperatures, 4 inches, which is a common planting depth. You can see across Georgia, most of southern Georgia is in the upper 60s right now, which means not only is corn able to be planted, but you can actually start to plant cotton and also peanuts at 65 and above. And so everybody's finishing up their corn. They're trying to get other things into the ground. Now, of course, the dry conditions are not good for planting because seeds need moisture to germinate. So that's been a little bit of a concern, I think. I put the EcoNet soil temperatures from North Carolina on here as well. The numbers are a little hard to read, but you can go to the website and look at them in more detail. Mostly along the coastal areas and in the eastern 2/3 of North Carolina, they're running in the upper 50s to low 60s, so it certainly would be warm enough to plant corn. Other things, maybe not quite as much. So let's go on and look at the next slide, which I think is my last regular slide. And this is something about wildfires. Yes. When I was coming home from Asheville on Saturday, I noticed there were a lot of plumes of wildfires around, and Chris has talked a bit about this already. The dry conditions have led to an increase in wildfires all over the area. In the Atlanta Journal-Constitution this morning, they said in Georgia alone, they've had 1644 wildfires so far this year, which is a 20% increase over what the long-term average is. And with warm and dry conditions expected to continue, that is likely to continue to be a concern over at least the next few weeks until we get more rain. There's a lot of extra fuel out there from down trees from Helene. It also makes it very hard to get in to fight those fires, as Chris pointed out, because a lot of the roads and back areas are still blocked. And so that's really hard. So for those of you who do controlled burns this time of year, make sure that you are following local regulations, and make sure that you are obeying those. Yeah, when I was in Sunday school as a kid, they had the song that started out, "It only takes a spark to get a fire going." And you don't want to start a spark, whether or not you're throwing a cigarette out of a truck window, or you're doing something with a dragging chain on a trailer. Doesn't take much to get a fire started, and so you really want to be careful this time of year. I also think it's a really good time for you to go and scout your own property for potential fire risks, because if we do go into a really active fire season and fires expand, as they did in the drought in 2016 across a lot of the region, you are going to want to make sure that your house and your farm buildings are protected from that. And so you want to make sure that now is the time to do it before the fire is already on the way towards your property. So that's all I've got for today. I should mention, while I was waiting for the webinar, the Georgia Forestry Commission did put out their significant wildland fire potential. And if you want to see that, you can go to their Facebook page. Georgia Forestry Commission does show that wildfire potential does occur across a lot of the Southeast through May, and that is something that you're going to want to be looking at. So that's all I've got. The next slide is just my summary slide. And now we're going to turn this over to Brad Pugh, who's going to talk to us about the outlooks. And so take it away, Brad.
All right. Thank you, Pam, Shelby, and Chris. Great review there of the current and past conditions. So, yeah, we'll finish up the webinar today, checking out the forecast going forward through the remainder of the spring and start of the summer. So I'm Brad Pugh, meteorologist and forecaster at NOAA's Climate Prediction Center. And before we check out the April and April, May, June outlooks, just a note here on the maps themselves. The forecast is released on the third Thursday of each month, and the temperature and precipitation outlooks depict the probability that the monthly or 3-month average temperature precipitation will fall into the lower third, middle third, or upper third, and that's known as a terciles of the 30-year record, which is 1991 through 2020. And on these outlooks, you'll see, in some cases, some pretty large white areas on the maps, and those designate equal chances of below, near, or above average. And we forecast equal chances when there's really no apparent influence on the climate for a specific region, or there's conflicting signals among the forecast guidance. Yeah, threw this map in. Also have a pie chart here in a little bit, but yeah, just kind of describes the probabilistic outlooks, what they mean. In the middle here, we have the equal chance. So you can see, 33.3% chance of cooler than normal temperatures, 33.3% chance of near normal temperatures, or then 33.3% chance of warmer than normal temperatures. So if you go with favored above normal temperatures, warmer than normal temperatures, as you go up in probabilities, so increase the probabilities, say to more than 40%, you can see how the chance for below normal temperatures decreases, and even further as you go into the higher above normal temperature probabilities. So checking out the April temperature and precipitation outlook, and for this webinar, kind kind of focus on the southeast mostly. For the month of April, for the southeast, we are favoring above normal temperatures. The higher probabilities above 50% are forecast over the Florida Peninsula. And the precipitation outlook for April shows an increased chance of below normal precipitation for areas of southern Alabama, southern Georgia, and Florida, and a forecast of equal chances as you move a little closer to the southern Appalachians. And this April forecast will be updated next Monday, March 31st. So yeah, please check back on that updated forecast. All right, so checking out the April, May, June temperature and precipitation outlook. For that 3-month time period, we are favoring above normal temperatures. Most of the southeast is in the 40 to 50% chance for above normal temperatures. You will note in this forecast the highest probabilities across the lower 48 states are forecast across the southwestern U.S., and that's due in part to low soil moisture conditions. And in terms of the April, May, June precipitation outlook, the signal among our tools was either kind of weak or conflicting over the southeastern U.S. So yeah, unfortunately, just kind of an equal chance of below, near, or above normal precipitation for that 3-month time period. And as far as like what kind of tools guidance we used for the monthly and seasonal outlooks, it was driven by dynamical models, the North American multi-model ensemble, but also a lingering response to La Niña. We are expecting a transition to ENSO neutral conditions, but typically see a lingering effect from La Niña into the early spring. Next slide here, once again, just kind of illustrates here this pie chart on the left-hand side. You know what this means for these 3 different terciles. So if you, and this is an interactive display available on our website, Climate Prediction Center website. So 46% chance of above normal temperatures, 33% chance for near normal, and then 21% for below normal. So also included some of our shorter range forecast, and this is our week 3-4 temperature and precipitation outlook. This is issued each Friday. So this is the forecast from last Friday, March 21st, and it's valid for April 5th through the 18th. So we're favoring above normal temperatures for the southeastern U.S. to be accompanied by below normal precipitation. I will note the week 3-4 outlook is it's a 2-category forecast, so it's either below or above average. Somewhat confusing because it's different from our seasonal forecast, so we do plan to transition this to a tercile forecast in the future. And the week 2 temperature and precipitation outlook, this is released each day. And this is the forecast from yesterday, valid for the first week of April. So pretty high forecast confidence for above normal temperatures during that first week of April throughout the southeast. Probabilities are exceeding 60% for Alabama, Georgia, the Florida Panhandle. So yeah, pretty high likelihood for a warm start to April. Precipitation outlook, just a slight lean towards below normal normal precipitation forecast for much of the southeast. Although as you head northward, near normal precipitation, a little bit more likely for northeastern Georgia and South Carolina. So another seasonal product that we issue is the seasonal drought outlook. It's released on the third Thursday of each month, and it uses the U.S. Drought Monitor for ongoing drought areas. And it's a forecast of drought change by the end of the valid period. So this latest seasonal drought outlook uh, is ends on June 30th. And the major tools used include climatology for the next 3 months, which, for the Southeast, there's not a real high variance throughout the year, except for Florida, obviously. It's winter is much drier time of year compared to the summertime. Um, dy Dynamical model forecast at various time scales, and then INSO composites, whether you're in La Niña or El Niño. So here's the seasonal drought outlook that was released last Thursday. Once again, it's valid for March 20th through the end of June. So as of last week, there was drought for parts of the Carolinas, Georgia, and also the Florida Peninsula. So we're going with a forecast of persistence for the ongoing drought areas. I think we could see some additional development here over the coming weeks if we don't see rainfall during the early to mid part of April. So we'll see how that plays out. The forecast for Florida is kind of tricky because expect a drought to persist or expand over the next month. But as you move into June, that is a very wet time of year. Normal rainfall in some areas as high as 8, 9, 10 inches, especially South Florida. So with that very wet time of year during June, we would expect drought to improve by the end of June. So yeah, just kind of a summary slide here, what to expect this spring for the Southeast region. April is likely to start off with above average temperatures with near to below normal precipitation. And drought coverage is expected to remain steady or increase by the middle part of April. Later in the spring, uncertainty increases with the April, May, June precipitation outlook having equal chances of either below, near, or above normal precipitation. But I think it's important to remember the seasonal outlook, so valid April, May, June, does favor above normal temperatures. So we're likely to have some episodes, of some heat there in the southeast. So if you have those above average temperatures and just a 2 or 3 week period with little or no rainfall, that could set off a rapid onset drought. So that's something to keep in mind, especially as we move later into the spring and the summer. And with that, I did want to talk just real quick here. At CPC, we do have a rapid onset drought forecast that we introduced a few years ago. And I wanted to share a forecast we made last summer. So we had a rapid onset drought here in parts of the southeast. I guess it was probably a little bit more notable farther north over the mid-Atlantic, central Appalachians. But you can see June 18th, 2024, did have some abnormal dryness showing up on the U.S. Drought Monitor, but just 4 weeks later, yeah, some of these areas went into D2 to D3 severe to extreme drought. And this is the 4-week U.S. Drought Monitor change map. So yeah, parts of the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, had a 2 to 3 class degradation in DX category. So we consider a rapid onset drought to be defined by 2 category degradation. So in the U.S. Drought Monitor, going from no drought to D1, moderate drought, or D0, abnormal dryness, to D2 or higher in the U.S. Drought Monitor. So yeah, so here's the forecast we released back on June 20th. So we had this area highlighted, the mid-Atlantic states down into the Western Carolinas, northern Georgia, for the risk of rapid onset drought. So I think overall we did pretty good. We kind of missed some of the drought that developed though in Alabama. And over the past year or so, we've CPC, and this is a big effort throughout the National Weather Service to release these key messages. And at CPC, our outlooks start at the week 2 time period. So kind of the subseasonal suite of products here. We really try to get these key messages out to alert folks of rapid onset drought, heat waves, heavy precipitation coming up 2 weeks out in advance. So yeah, we did issue a key message for this rapid onset drought event during late June and early July last year. So yeah, just want to kind of share that with you. Yeah, please check back at our website. As we head into the summer, as I'm sure we'll have some rapid onset drought events here. Maybe not in the southeast, but other parts of the country. So yeah, thank you very much.
Hey, Brad, that was wonderful. Thank you for joining us. Hello, everyone. My name is Meredith Muth. I work at NOAA's National Integrated Drought Information System, and I am standing in today to help with the Q&A period from Elliot Wickham, who could not join us today. Just a reminder, if you have any questions for any of our speakers today, please put them in the question box and we'll get to that. We'll also be sending out a recording of this webinar in the next couple of days. Our next webinar will be in April on coastal flooding in the Southeast. And as always, we have a quick little webinar, post-webinar survey when you exit today. So feel free to fill that out if you have any topics that you would like to hear about in the future. So first, Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you to read out any questions if they exist in a moment. But I did want to ask Brad something. So Brad, thank you for kind of doing a little deeper dive on some of the official NOAA outlooks for precipitation, temperature, and drought. We show these outlooks every single month in our webinar. So it was really helpful that you went a little bit more into detail about how they're created and where you can find them, etc. We always link to those. You did mention, Brad, that you released key messages from the Weather Service to alert the public on emerging hazards 2 weeks in advance. We also try to do the same thing on this monthly webinar. 2 weeks obviously is better than 1 month. I'm wondering if you could elaborate on how the public can access those early warning alerts. Do they need to go to the website? Do they need to go to their local weather forecast office? How are these national alerts distributed at more of a regional, state, and local level? If you could explain that, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yes, Meredith. Yeah, they're posted on our website, and also shared via social media, Facebook and Twitter, X, and also communicated down to like the National Weather Service regions and other folks. So and that they help to kind of enhance the communication that way as well.
Great, thank you, Brad. Okay, Chris, I'll turn it over to you. Do we have any questions today?
I do not see any questions in the chat right now. So if folks are thinking about, if you were thinking about asking a question or had one jotted down during any of the presentations, this is your opportunity to put them in the chat or let us know.
I think you, Pam, and Shelby were incredibly comprehensive. It was a very active month, but we'll give it a moment to see if any questions come in. And I also welcome any of our speakers to provide any additional kind of reflections or comments. Wow, I think this is a first, Chris. No questions. Well, there's nothing wrong with ending a webinar early. So I would just like to say again, thank you for taking the time to join us today. We hope to hear from you next month. And with that, I will close this webinar. Take care.